He was the one that went all in on China. This is the same guy. Welcome to the Sundowners Club. I'm your host, Sean, and today we're going to be talking about all the changes that are going on at Disney. Is Disney in trouble? What do they need to do to right the ship? Can they right the ship? And what are our predictions for what we think the next 6 to 12 months are going to be around their content, some of the films and series that are coming out, who might be getting fired, removed? Are they going to sell parts of the business to Apple? We're going to cover several of those subjects today, and we'd love to get your thoughts. If you like what you hear today, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. And most importantly, hit the subscribe button so that we can grow the content. Without further ado, man, am I right? My co-host Sterling. What's up, buddy?
Not much. How are you?
I'm good. So over the course of right before Thanksgiving to now, it's been a whirlwind at Disney. It's, we started out with the Elton John concert that was streaming live, and Bob Chapek was supposed to come out and introduce Elton John, and then got the text that he was to exit stage right, and he was fired. And then all the people in the crowd that were there started getting messages. We're on a text chain where they're all part of the media content group, and Bob Iger was going to be returning. Chapek was out, so they were in a state of shock. And so in the wake of that, there was a bunch of speculation. Is Kathy Kennedy at Lucasfilm now going to be more entrenched and in a better position with Bob Iger returning to Disney? Is she not going to be in a stronger position? What's going to happen with Lucasfilm? What's going to happen with some of the different content properties? Is the belt going to be tightened now that we learned that on the November 8th call, Disney lost $1.5 billion in this last quarter alone? That is over $600 million additional loss from this quarter last year. So they've doubled the loss, mainly around the streaming platform. So there are all kinds of rumors flying around about were the books being cooked? How are they counting subscribers? How are they offsetting costs from different divisions of the company, the real cost for some of this content they put out? We've mentioned before that just in a series like Andor, they spent $180 million for the first season. And if you look at the Nielsen ratings, Andor up to, I think the last ratings I saw was around episode 8 or 9, so going back to the back end of the season, it was the lowest rated Disney show behind Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, and Obi-Wan. So even though some of the critics, I personally liked Andor better than Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. I had issues with the show, which I've made known around pacing and around editing. But I do think that they did some bold things. But when you alienate and you limit, alienate's probably not the right word. When you limit your audience to kids can't really watch it, it's really for the adults. And you've got so many bridges that have been burned in the Star Wars platform and the brand that no matter how good Andor would have been, I think there's been damage done. So Iger comes in and he has to fix a lot of things that some of which he caused. So he was the one that went all in on China. So for a guy that people think is going to come in and fix what's wrong with Disney, here's a guy who, when he wanted to cater to China, and we don't even need to get into China's history on human rights and child labor and all the things that go on in China that we should not be supporting, but he wanted to cater to China. So this is the same guy that took a poster that had Finn on it, and we'll show that on the screen. The original poster had Finn side by side with Rey in the original Force Awakens, but China didn't like that. So to appease China, he took his leading or co-leading character in the movie, which happened to be a black man, and he downsized his image to the bottom right of the screen so that the movie would be shown in China. That's who Bob Iger is. And so I'm not making a moral judgment on Bob Iger. That's not my place to do that. But I will say that people that think this guy's going to come in and get Disney back on track and focus on, not getting involved in some of the politics, this is a guy that tweeted out, that they should have been involved in fighting the bill that was down in Florida when Chapek wouldn't say anything about it. This is the guy that catered to China. He's been all over the map. This is the guy that supported Kathy Kennedy when they did The Last Jedi. So he comes in. I don't really understand all the thought behind that they think Iger is, or people think that Iger is going to come in and correct the ship. One, there's a lot to talk about today, but can the ship be corrected? I guess that's the first thing. Do you think Disney is too far gone on the political spectrum and alienating half the country, half their audience potentially?
Did you watch his town hall meeting with the employees?
Yeah, I did. I watched.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw various.
To me,
clips.
he seems like he's absolutely clueless. He has no idea. When he talks about, he says, we don't want to get involved in political statements. He acts like it's not even. They act like they're completely clueless to what that means. And what it means is they always take an overtly progressive position on every single thing they release. That's what people mean. And they act like, well, the stuff that we're doing, it has nothing to do with politics. It's just right. Well,
that's what he said, right?
Yeah.
He said some of these things are not political in his view. It's right.
Not half your audience doesn't see it that way. And I would say over half your audience. You look at their box office numbers on everything, on all their major franchises. I mean, let's look at Star Wars. Episode 7, it had almost $2 billion at the box office. People were excited for Star Wars because there hadn't been a Star Wars in like 12 years, so people couldn't wait. By episode 8, it had lost 25% of its audience. It made around $1.4 billion. And then by episode 9, it barely made $1 billion. So in their quest to grow their audience, they have lost more people than they've gained. They lost half their audience between episode 7 and episode 9.
And then he came out after the last movie, after Rise of Skywalker, he came out and said, I think we're going to take a break on the films for a while and we're going to focus on the streaming. So, by the way, they came out with the standalone Star Wars stories.
Right.
They did Rogue One, and then Solo came out and was a disaster. So they scrapped the whole standalone movie projects. And so we know Boba Fett and Obi-Wan were originally supposed to be standalone movies. So then they took
Obi-Wan would have been so much better as a 2-hour movie, too.
Sure.
Yeah, you had characters that could have been cut, so much crap that was just unnecessary. And but to me, it always seems like they just double down, triple down on it, and they silence an entire fan base. And
so here's what he said. Here's what he said at the town hall. He was talking about the politics and the negative impact on the company. And he said, and to the extent that I can work to quiet things down, I'm going to do that, Iger said at the town hall. So all these articles were run. Iger's going to quiet things down on the political front and get back to focusing on the business. No. Well, but they didn't. It's misleading because then after that, he says, but one of the core values of our storytelling is inclusion and acceptance and tolerance, Iger said, and we can't lose that. He goes on to talk about how Disney's stories throughout the generations have changed the world. First of all, your mission, and he knows this, so he's pandering.
Right.
He's speaking in broad strokes so that whatever side of the spectrum you fall on, you feel like he's speaking to you. So you don't really know which way he's going because he's saying, well, some of these things I just don't think are political. That's just right and wrong. And we can't please everybody. And so you have one group that looks and says, he's talking to us. He's going to fight for what we think is right. He's not going to please these people over here. Then you have the other side that says, oh, no. He's going to get the company focused on this, and he's not going to pander to this anymore.
They've taken an ultra-progressive stance on every single thing within the past 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And they get criticism from that side, too, because it's never enough for those people that love that. You can never have enough diversity and inclusion. There always needs to be more. So, I mean,
you can tell in their content, and we can go through animated movies. I mean, Strange World just came out and bombed.
Huge flop. Lightyear, huge flop.
We just talked about they lost $1.5 billion from the same quarter from this year from last year. And then Bob Iger returns, Strange World comes out, and it's going to lose over $100 million.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be a big-time loser.
Their stock has lost half its value in 1 year.
And then they just had to complete the acquisition for the remaining 15% stake in BAMTech, which is the tech behind the streaming platforms that they purchased through Major League Baseball for $900 million. This company is bleeding. So you look at the revenue they have coming in, then you look at the net income. This is all numbers. And at the end of the day, I think that we can point out stories that are told in different platforms that are not Disney. I don't have to look any further than Game of Thrones. The way that it fit within the story made total sense. and you could tell that there was no pandering. It's just this was what was within the story.
I feel like Disney's hitting check boxes.
That's right.
They're
Instead of looking at what the story is not coming first, an agenda's coming first, and that's what happens when you put a bunch of people in a story group. Look no further than Lucasfilm. Kathy Kennedy comes out and says, well, you know, in my story group, my writer's room, 6 of the 8 people are women. Well, that's great if they're the best people for the job from a standpoint of writing and creativity. But, you know, you're talking about a fan base that largely...
It's young men.
Yeah.
Well, the excuse is always to grow the fan base, but when you look at the numbers, they're losing more people than they're gaining. So it's, you know, if you get more female Star Wars fans, that's great, but you don't want to do it at the expense of all, you know, most of your existing fans. And I think that's kind of what they've done. They don't understand demographics. You know, I feel like almost everything appeals to young women, you know, which is what Disney has done in the past. You know, like, and that's fine. There's an audience for that. Look at Frozen, right? There's an audience where young girls are dragging their parents to the movies to go see Frozen. But that's not what Star Wars is. That's not the demographic.
Right.
And I don't think they understand demographics. You can't make all things for everybody.
Disney has done a phenomenal job with, you know, Cinderella, Snow White, Ariel, Belle.
You mean like the classic cartoons?
The classic one.
Yeah.
And then they evolved and said, hey, we've got Moana, and we've got they put out Coco.
Mm-hmm.
And
those are good movies.
Yes, they're very good. Like, because they serve the story. And so you can tell when it is something that where whoever's creating it has a pure passion for it. It shows itself, whether it's animated or live action, you know. But then you see these individuals, and we'll get into some of this in a minute, because I think Iger's got some real challenges on his hands. I mean, he's got to decide. The rumors are that they're in talks to potentially sell Disney to Apple. You know, they need to fix their books first. So there's going to be no acquisition until Disney
go through
fixes their books.
I mean, that would be like a mega corp.
And there's been rumors for years that they would sell off ESPN. They don't own all of Hulu.
ESPN's been bleeding a while, I think.
Yeah, so they could sell off now that they've completed the BAMTech, which is the platform behind the streaming. You know, Apple, they're not going to sell IP to Apple, but they could sell tech. So carving out some of these things that are losers for them will help to some degree, but it's not going to help be able to fix some of the issues around who are running these divisions. You've got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that where they're at today is 20% of where they were when the first Avengers movie came out.
When's the last movie they've had that's broke $1 billion? It was Spider-Man, but that was Sony, mostly Sony.
The Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was over 900. It was close. It's close.
Yeah.
And Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever won't get there. I don't believe it'll get there.
So you're losing and keep in mind, tickets are way more expensive than they were
but
3 or 4 years ago.
But they didn't release Wakanda Forever in China either. Now,
China and Russia made $120 million combined. It's going to come up well under $120 million.
But this is a guy that pandered to China. Yeah. And we have Avatar coming out in December, and it's going to be released in China. So there's a couple things that they're banking on hardcore for December. We're going to know where things stand pretty quickly. Iger coming back and doing layoffs, so he's confirmed they're going to go forward with the layoffs that Chapek announced. People acted like he wasn't going to do that. Of course he's going to do that. They have to do that. It's a business decision. So you have that. You have Avatar coming out. They need that movie to be a big hit. And then they're increasing their subscriber fees for all those of you out there that have Disney Plus or the Disney Plus bundle without ads, with ads. If you don't have ads, they're going to add to the pricing. So I think some of the bundles will go up a few dollars a month.
I might be out. I don't know.
So they're going to increase their Now, they instituted some of this stuff in the parks. And that went over really well, right?
Their parks are the only thing keeping them afloat, I guess, because people are still going. I've heard the experience is miserable, but people are still going. So it's the streaming and the box office that's not doing what it needs to do.
And then, Iger was all in on Shanghai, with Disney parks in Shanghai. So he's catered to China. That's not going to change. He's just not going to do that. So what is their identity with Iger? Obviously, does he have political aspirations? It's a 2-year contract. Who are they going to find in the next 2 years to run this thing? I mean, there's all kinds of rumors, of who it could be. But They've got to fix this thing first, and I don't see how they can fix it in 2 years. I think this thing is what I'm looking for. I just recently watched, or it just came out in the last day, the beginning of Willow. The most laughable thing that I probably have ever seen from Disney, Marvel. It was like a 10-year-old wrote it. Jonathan Kasdan, who's the son of Lawrence Kasdan, who gets a lot of credit for Empire Strikes Back. But if you want to look up Lee Brackett, Google Lee Brackett and see who wrote the original treatments for Empire Strikes Back. But Lawrence Kasdan, his son Jonathan, brought us Solo, a Star Wars story. As much as I had issues with Solo, that's nothing compared to what they just came out with Willow. So this is a property that I don't even know needed to be, or think even should have been made into a series.
I love the original movie, though. Did you see the original?
Okay, well, the original movie is like Gone with the Wind or The Godfather compared to this piece of garbage. This is the worst thing. It's so laughable. It's like Valley Girl or Clueless meets Game of Thrones.
It's not, but again, that's not knowing your demographic.
Yeah, and it's definitely catering to a young audience, but you have people speaking with British accents, and then you have the person next to them saying, "Well, totally, really, that's like weird, right?" You're like, "What am I watching?" And then they have a scene where this character that you think is going to be important is riding with them, and an arrow gets shot through his chest. It's an older knight, and he falls off the horse dead. And they go, "Oh, let's get out of here!" And they take off. Nobody's upset or cry, or they're just like, "Hey, we got to go." So they take off, and then they're being chased, and there's a cliff. This is the most laughable thing I think I've seen in a film or a series. I can't even remember the last thing I've seen that's just laughable. They're going near a cliff, and their horses go over the cliff. It's like 100-foot drop, and their water is shallow. It's like 6 feet deep. So you would think that they would all die. They would fall into shallow water, and they'd be maimed, injured, dead. No, they go into it, and they go across the water, and they made it through. It's so laughable. Jonathan Kasdan, if I see his name attached to anything moving forward, I don't care if it's Disney, Lucasfilm, Universal. I can't imagine once he's burned all the goodwill that his dad, has created for him, that anybody's going to hire him. I mean, it is laughable that this guy was given after Solo single-handedly put them back in the Star Wars brand, 5 years plus, to give him a series like this. And we don't know yet how much they spent on Willow. It looks like they spent about $100,000 an episode, but I can't imagine they did. This guy should never be allowed to do anything. Look, if Iger doesn't fire, I think they already replaced Michelle Rejwan, who was with SVP of Lucasfilm under Kathy Kennedy. I think she's out of that position, but she's supposedly still being involved with producing. Get her out of there.
They need to clean house.
Clean it out. Clean house out.
Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, they need to clean house.
And look, whatever good Kathy Kennedy's done, I mean, we grew up on her movies that she was a producer with Frank Marshall on. I have a lot of respect for Kathy's history and everything she's done as a fan. I mean, you could see some of the things we have on our wall here. They're 80s movies. So very respectful of what she's done in the past. It's time for her to go.
Yeah.
If you were to greenlight some of the things she's greenlit, and then all the directors. Another thing I looked at. This was the director that directed Willow. I looked it up last night. Was like the third director. The first guy directed Crazy Rich Asians, and he had a good pedigree. And he exited, said he wanted to spend more time at home. I find that hard to believe.
What's crazy, though, is if you look up legacy media reviews of this stuff, they say positive things about it. And there's nothing they can do where corporate media won't shill for them.
Nobody's watching anything. None of these things on Disney Plus are being watched. I mean, you'll have the I think WandaVision got some good got some good viewership ratings. WandaVision did.
I think Loki was the most watched, but a lot of people.
Mandalorian.
Yeah, well, the Marvel shows, but like a lot of fans, they didn't like it, and it's one thing, you can't just look at the success of that initial show. You have to see how it sets up the brand, and that's where they're destroying themselves. People aren't excited for what's coming.
If Andor had come out, I believe this. If Andor had come out after Rogue One,
it would have done a lot better. Yeah,
huge hit. Andor is suffering from all the crap that has come before it. And if you look at what Iger is going to have to deal with, in the parks around the content. I mean, the $1.5 billion loss, I mean, that comes out and within a week, Chapek is fired. So we know how important profit over subscriber count is to Disney right now. They've got to fix that. And so, let's get to the final thing. It's the final nail in the coffin. So Strange World came out, lost 100, is going to lose over $100 million. We'll see what the final numbers around Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever is going to be. It's going to make money, so it's not going to be a loser. Ryan Coogler, I'm a fan of Ryan Coogler. Angela Bassett, kicks butt. I like Angela Bassett. I think Wakanda Forever was tough because you're having to, how are you going to move forward without Chadwick Boseman? So I feel for the fact that they had a very hard road to hoe, and you can't hold them to the expectation of let's do the same amount of money that the first one did without Chadwick Boseman. Now, that being said, the movie ends with Chadwick Boseman, his character T'Challa's son, at the end of the movie. So I believe they're going to bring in a Black Panther for the future. And I think that they still have a way to build that brand and have people excited about it. That being said, Avatar's got to be a big hit. A big hit. It can't do like $1 billion. It's got to be a big hit. And then we get to some of the streaming content coming out, Mandalorian and Ahsoka. And then we have Indiana Jones. And let me tell you what, as we segue into Indiana Jones, for those that get on the internet and get on Reddit and 4chan and then watch some of the different YouTube providers that have received plot leaks from this supposed test screening around the Indiana Jones 5 movie that's coming out in June. The first thing that we saw was James Mangold came out, the director for Indy 5, came out quickly and said there were no test screenings and I would never kill Indy, So let's talk about that for a second. So he said there were no test screenings. So that doesn't mean that they didn't have people sitting in a room watching the film. They could be employees. There's ways to dance around that verbiage so that you're not really telling a lie. But he's also doing damage control because the last thing you want is like what happened with Rise of Skywalker. Remember when all the information came out about Rise of Skywalker? The leaks started coming out about they were riding horses and they were fighting on the outside of Star Destroyers, as the thing was tilting and the silliness around Palpatine. And you're like, this can't be true, right?
It was. No.
It was true. It was all true. The whole thing was true. The same thing's happening with Indy. And look at the damage that was done after Last Jedi to Rise of Skywalker. Now we have Indy 5. And so let me tell you what a few people that came out of these screenings were saying about Indy 5. So the movie starts with Marion Ravenwood telling Indy that he needs to suit back up for one last adventure and kind of get back into the fray. And so this is so crazy. So the MacGuffin in Indy 5 is this clock, and the clock has the ability to involve time travel, right? So the Nazis. Again, by the way, this takes place in like 1969, around the time of the landing on the moon. So it's in the 60s, and the golden clock, it's a key to an ancient time portal, and a group of neo-Nazis are trying to get their hands on the clock before Indy can, and they go to like ancient Rome and for a time, and then they end up, I guess they can't really control the time travel, so they end up in 1933. Well, we know from 1933 that that's young Indiana Jones. Mm-hmm. And so the biggest part of the movie takes place around 1933, and we have this character, Helena, that is Marcus Brody's granddaughter. Marcus Brody, who was one of Indy's friends from the original movies, and was kind of the goofy guy that always was kind of getting lost and things. But Marcus Brody, it's his granddaughter, and they travel back in time, and there's a young Indiana Jones and the old Indiana Jones and Helena. And in the end of the movie, young Indiana Jones sacrifices himself to save Helena. And in doing so, the old Indiana Jones, a la Marty McFly from Back to the Future, from the photo, the old Indiana Jones starts to fade away because the young Indiana Jones has died saving Helena. So he dies, he fades away, old Indy is gone, and Helena picks up the hat. So I guess when he faded away, the hat didn't disappear. She puts on the hat, and the movie ends with Helena being replacing Indy in all the famous scenes from the prior movies that happened after 1933. It's like,
It's
who,
par for the. I mean, that's what you expect, though.
well, you would say this is so laughable. There's a 0% chance that this is even possible until you see
What they've done with Star Wars, and
Last Jedi,
what they've
Rise
done
of
with Willow.
Skywalker, Willow,
Yeah.
all the Marvel stuff. Like
It's at
when
this
you-
point, it's. I know they're going to screw it up, but the question is, will they screw it up bad enough to the point where I still can't enjoy it? And in most cases, the answer is yes, and I just don't watch it. And I hope that's not true. I've heard the director, he responded to that and said it wasn't true, but it sounds par for the course for everything they've done.
So
the
supposedly
past few
they've
years.
done multiple reshoots. So there's got to be, with a movie this big, there's got to be 4 or 5 different potential endings or things that they filmed, right?
Mhm.
And so Iger has seen all this. I bet you I bet you Iger, because he knew he was coming back, he's already seen this stuff. He saw this stuff before he took over and came back to Disney. So Iger has seen it. I don't have any faith that Iger, first of all, is Iger an Indiana Jones fan? Is Kathy Kennedy? I mean, I don't even know that she's an Indiana Jones fan or a Star Wars fan. I mean, Kathy Kennedy is a producer, or has been a producer now, runs Lucasfilm, and there's an agenda. Whether you agree with it or not, there is an agenda.
It's a classic bait and switch that they've done in almost everything they've released.
Yeah.
know?
So, I mean, obviously, you can look at some of the things we have on the table that I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. Raiders of the Lost Ark was part of my youth growing up.
Great
The
movies.
Last Crusade, great.
Temple of Doom.
It's my least of the 3 favorites,
That's actually my favorite.
but it's still good.
Yeah, I like.
I mean, those 3 movies I can still watch any of the 3 of them. I would say that about the original Star Wars trilogy, the Back to the Future movies. I mean, Superman.
Every
all
time
those
it
movies.
comes on, if it comes on TV, you just watch it. It's
Yeah,
hard to turn it off.
absolutely. And so it's unfathomable to think that this could happen. But
Not anymore.
I mentioned the Indy 5 leaks because if this movie comes out and 70% of what was been rumored is true, not even 100%, just 70%, it's that brand Indiana Jones is done. Star Wars is dying. I love Star Wars. We've covered it. We want to cover. I love Mandalorian. I want to
Curious
see
how
Ahsoka.
Willow will do.
There's no way Willow's not going to be an absolute trash heap. There's no way. There's no way that show is going to do good at all. There's no way. It's impossible. So because at the end of the day, you got kids, young people, they don't know what Willow is. So no, it's impossible. All these things add up to this is a larger problem within Disney that they have removed all these people. It's like people that know how to build the parks, and you take all the people out that know how to build rides, and you bring people in that are really good at software and electronics. So you walk into kiosk, man, that kiosk is really a great design. Where we went and picked up our food, the tech around the screens looks really great, but the rides stink.
Right.
And I came for the rides. It's like you're hiring all these people, and that's why I mentioned I hate to beat up on Jonathan Kasdan, but those people should be nowhere near Lucasfilm. Those people should be nowhere near Marvel. When they say they're not fans or they're trying to bring in an agenda.
That's the wrong person.
No, you've got a story to tell. Understand, we've talked about. I know you were a fan of the Witcher games and Henry Cavill. He left The Witcher not because he's going to be busy going back to Superman. He left The Witcher because he's a fan of the Witcher lore and the games, and they deviated from it so badly that when his contract was up, he said, "I'm out of here." And so those are the types of things that happens. But the difference is Hastings that runs Netflix, he will, wherever there's a misstep, he'll fix it. He'll fix it. And so I don't have any faith that Disney's going to fix it, but we will know where things stand very quickly because they've got to make some major decisions in a quick amount of time. And we're going to see the price increases in December. How many people are going to leave the service because of that, even if it's a few dollars a month?
But when you point to an event that could turn their company around, what do you think that is?
I hate to say it because I won't ever talk about people's jobs, but I think replacing Kathy Kennedy at Lucasfilm with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, or somebody that would instill instant faith that the ship's going to be corrected, and and I think announcing that something around Star Wars that will excite people again, whatever that story ends up being. I don't know. I honestly, I think looking at Iron Man and some of the other things, I think you got to find a way to bring some of the people back, like Robert Downey Jr. or somebody.
Well, I think you need to focus on characters that people care about.
I mean, obviously we know Tony Stark died, but
Right.
there's ways to bring him
Well,
back.
they're doing
right?
the multiverse thing. They
Yeah.
can bring back anyone. But I think the key is the X-Men. I think that's going to be huge. And if they cast that right, and just try to be authentic as possible, cast characters that you can see in those roles, just like they did with the original MCU films. I mean,
well, they spent billions of dollars on Fox, and they've had nothing to show for it yet.
Right.
So they have to get X-Men right, and that's another IP that you can't bring somebody in who doesn't know the history of the comics, and
Right.
Wolverine and Cyclops and all the
well,
characters.
they've got that lady that's like one of the head producers who thought the name X-Men was offensive. So
Yeah,
it's like that's not who needs to be running that. That is the exact opposite of who needs to be running that. So I mean, I don't know. That's going to be crucial. If they screw that up, they could be in a scenario where they're selling Marvel, which I'd be okay with.
As
at
much
this
of a
point.
struggle as Warner Brothers has had, look at David Zaslav. One decision. Look how much goodwill they have already because they said we're bringing Henry Cavill back, and we're bringing back the wonder and the hope and the positivity of Superman. One decision. Look at all the goodwill they've gotten from that.
Right.
And you make 3 or 4 good decisions, and you can turn
And
it around.
that's another company that was just has been in the dumps doing the exact same thing.
The
Disney
difference
has done.
is I have faith in James Gunn and David Zaslav to make the right business
'cause-
decisions and let the creative work, which is
Well,
James Gunn.
Zaslav's cleaning house though.
That's right.
So he's doing exactly what Iger needs to do. I'm not 100% Iger's going to do that. So
Yeah. We'll be here to cover. I mean, obviously, there's going to be stuff coming out, especially during the holidays. There's going to be a lot of information coming out. We're going to cover it, and there are a few things that are coming out in the next few weeks that I'm kind of excited to cover. So we'll cover that. But until then, let us know what you think. There's a lot of information out there around Disney right now. We're going to give our opinions, for better or worse, whatever anybody thinks about them. We're going to tell what we believe to be the truth as we see it, and what you think of it is what you think of it. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. And most importantly, hit the subscribe button so that we can grow the content in the channel. And TCB.